The conference hall aboard the massive ship called Harmony's Light gleamed with silver walls and floating lights. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in their special chairs, each designed for their unique bodies. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed with soft colors. Among them sat the humans, looking small and plain compared to their alien neighbors. Ho adjusted his simple gray suit and watched the room carefully. He had been Earth's main diplomat for 3 years now, and he had learned to read the mood of these gatherings. Today felt tense. The representatives kept staring at the human section with their cold yellow eyes. Their reptilian faces showed something that looked like contempt. Next to Ho sat Wu, a young woman who studied alien cultures. She leaned close and whispered, "The ambassador keeps making gestures. In their culture, it means they think we're weak." Ho nodded slowly but said nothing. He had dealt with the before. They were an empire built on conquest and strength. They respected power and nothing else. For the past 15 years, since humans joined the Galactic Coalition, they had barely hidden their disgust for humanity's peaceful ways. The meeting began with routine business, trade agreements, scientific exchanges, and cultural programs. Humans had made their mark in the galaxy through medicine, farming technology, and their talent for solving disputes. Other species called them the gentle mediators, the ones who preferred talking over fighting. But then the ambassador stood up. His name was, and he was nearly 8 feet tall with dark green scales and sharp teeth. He spoke in a voice that echoed through the hall. "I propose we discuss the matter of the Outer Rim territories," said. His words were formal, but his tone was mocking. Some species seem content to hide behind words while real powers shape the galaxy. Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew was talking about humans. Ho stood calmly. "Ambassador, if you have concerns about human colonies, we welcome direct discussion. We have always believed in open dialogue." His laugh was harsh and cold. "Dialogue. Yes, that is all your kind knows. You negotiate, you compromise, you smile and bow." He leaned forward, his claws gripping the podium. "Tell me, human, what would your people do if someone simply took what they wanted? Would you write a strongly worded letter?" The hall fell silent. A few species looked shocked at such direct rudeness. Others, the more aggressive ones, watched with interest. Ho kept his face calm. "We would seek to understand the situation and find a solution that benefits everyone involved." "Pathetic," spat. "The empire expands because we are strong. We take what we need. Your colonies sit on valuable worlds, growing food and studying plants like children playing in a garden. What a waste." Wu tensed beside Ho, but he placed a gentle hand on her arm. He knew what was doing. This was a test, a public challenge to see how humans would react. If Ho showed anger or fear, it would confirm everything they believed about humanity. "We prefer gardens to graveyards," Ho said quietly. "Perhaps that is the difference between our peoples." Snorted but sat down. The meeting continued, but the tension remained. When it finally ended, Wu walked quickly with Ho back to their quarters. "They're going to do something," she said urgently. Don't make threats like that unless they plan to act." Ho nodded. "I know. Send a message to Earth. Tell them they are becoming aggressive toward our outer colonies." Wu paused. "Should I recommend military readiness?" "No," Ho said softly. "That would alarm the coalition. They still don't know about our military capabilities. Let's keep it that way." This was humanity's great secret. When humans first encountered alien life 15 years ago, Earth's leaders made a careful decision. They had just ended their own devastating wars, conflicts that killed billions and nearly destroyed their world. The wounds were still fresh. The weapons were still warm. So when they met peaceful alien species who had never known such destruction, humans chose to present only their civilian face. They sent scientists, doctors, farmers, and diplomats. They shared medical technology and agricultural methods. They helped resolve conflicts through mediation. The galaxy saw humans as gentle because humans wanted to be seen that way. No one asked about Earth's military. No one questioned why a species could unite their entire planet so quickly. No one wondered what weapons humans might have used on each other during their wars. The coalition had rules against certain weapons, but humans had never officially signed those treaties. They simply never mentioned that they possessed such things. It seemed easier that way, safer, less frightening for their new alien friends. Far away from the diplomatic ship, on a farming colony called New, a man named Wu stood in a field of golden wheat. He was 53 years old with weathered skin and gray in his black hair. To everyone on the colony, he was just a farmer who had come here 8 years ago looking for peace and quiet. But Wu had secrets. Before he became a farmer, he had been a soldier. Not just any soldier, but a special forces commander who survived Earth's worst battles. He had fought in cities turned to rubble, commanded troops in desperate situations, and seen things that still haunted his dreams. He came to New to forget all that, to grow food and watch sunsets and never hold a weapon again. The colony had 50,000 people, mostly families and researchers. It was quiet and safe, far from Earth and far from trouble. Wu looked up at the sky as 3 moons rose over the wheat fields. He wondered sometimes if he should tell people about his past, but what would be the point? That life was over. He was a farmer now. He didn't know that among the 50,000 colonists, 847 others shared similar secrets. Former soldiers, engineers, pilots, and commanders. All of them had come to the outer colonies to escape their violent pasts. All of them believed they would never need those skills again. That same evening in the capital city of the empire, military commanders studied maps of human colonies. They had watched humans for years and reached a conclusion. These mammals were weak. They had no warriors, no weapons worth mentioning, no will to fight. The outer colonies were perfect targets, rich farming worlds with valuable resources, defended by nothing but farmers and scientists. Taking them would be simple, and the coalition would do nothing. The other species feared the military. Orders were prepared. Ships were. In 3 days, a fleet would travel to New and deliver an ultimatum: evacuate or be removed by force. The commanders never doubted what the humans would choose. Back on Harmony's light, Ho lay awake in his quarters. He thought about words and felt a familiar weight in his chest. It was the weight of secrets, the weight of history, the weight of knowing what humans were truly capable of when pushed too far. He hoped they would be smart enough to back down. He hoped he would never have to explain to the galaxy what humanity really was. But hope was not a strategy, and Ho had learned long ago that some people only understood strength. He just prayed the lesson wouldn't be too costly for everyone involved. The warning came without mercy. A fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of New System, and their message broadcast across every channel on the colony. "Attention human settlement," the cold voice announced. "This world has been claimed by the Empire. You have 12 hours to evacuate all personnel. After that time, we will remove any remaining presence by force. Resistance is futile. Compliance is your only option." Wu heard the message while working in his wheat field. He stood perfectly still for a moment, the wind moving the golden grain around him. Then he dropped his tools and started running toward the colony's main administration building. The streets were already filling with confused and frightened people. Children cried. Parents grabbed belongings. Some people stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. The governor, a kind woman named Minyoung, was trying to organize an evacuation, but her hands shook as she worked. Wu pushed through the crowd and into the governor's office. She looked up at him with desperate eyes. "They're giving us 12 hours, she said. "We have 50,000 people. The transport ships can't possibly evacuate everyone in time. Even if we started right now, we'd need 3 days minimum." I know, Wu said quietly. That's the point. They want people left behind so they have an excuse to attack. What do we do? Minyoung asked. We have no weapons, no military. We're farmers and scientists. Wu looked at her carefully. That's not exactly true, Governor. I need access to the colony's personnel files. Specifically, I need to find anyone who came here from Earth between 8 and 15 years ago. Minyoung frowned but gave him access to her computer. Wu began searching through records, his fingers moving quickly. He searched for specific details, age ranges, transfer dates, previous occupation listings that seemed vague or incomplete. An hour later, he had a list of 847 names. What is this? Minyoung asked, looking over his shoulder. These are people like me, Wu said. People who came to the colonies to escape something, to start over. He turned to face her. Governor, I wasn't always a farmer. Before I came here, I was a soldier. Special forces. I fought in the Unification Wars. Minyoung's eyes went wide. The Unification Wars were Earth's darkest period. 30 years of brutal fighting between different factions, with weapons and tactics that horrified even the survivors. Most humans never spoke about it. I think many of these people have similar backgrounds, Wu continued. I need to contact them, all of them, right now. Within 2 hours, people began arriving at an old warehouse on the edge of the colony. They came quietly, one by one. There was Min, who everyone knew as a mechanic but who had actually designed military fortifications. There was Jin, a school teacher who never mentioned her previous work training military snipers. Dong, a livestock farmer, had commanded an entire armored division. They stood in the warehouse, these ordinary-looking people, and recognized something in each other's eyes. The weight of experience, the shadow of violence, the knowledge of what humans could do when survival demanded it. Wu stood before them. They think we're helpless. They think we'll run or surrender. They've given us 12 hours, but that's not enough time to evacuate everyone. So we have a choice. We can abandon people here to die, or we can do what we once did. We can fight. A woman named Jin, who worked in the medical center, spoke up. We came here to escape war, to never hold weapons again. I know, Wu said. I came here for the same reason, but they're not giving us a choice. They're coming for our families, our neighbors, our children. The room fell silent. Then Min stepped forward. What do we have to work with? We have no military weapons. No, Wu agreed. But we have mining explosives, construction equipment, agricultural machines, and we have something they don't expect. We know how to fight. They spent the next 10 hours turning a farming colony into a fortress. Min used his engineering knowledge to create improvised explosive devices from mining charges. Jin found high spots with clear and positioned people with modified industrial lasers. Dong organized the heavy construction vehicles into defensive positions. They used the colony's irrigation tunnels as command centers and bunkers. They marked kill zones using their knowledge of the terrain. They prepared ambush points and fallback positions. 847 former soldiers, working with desperate speed, transforming everything around them into weapons. Meanwhile, aboard the Harmony's light, Wu was frantically trying to warn the Coalition Council. She had accessed Earth's military archives, something she had clearance for but had never needed before. What she found made her blood run cold. She downloaded files and burst into the council chamber, interrupting a session. You need to see this, she said urgently. They are about to attack New, and you don't understand what's going to happen. The council members looked annoyed at the interruption. An alien ambassador with blue skin and 4 arms waved dismissively. We are aware of the situation. It is unfortunate, but they have not technically violated any laws. The colony should evacuate. They can't evacuate in time, Wu said. And they know it, but that's not the point. You need to understand what humans are. She activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air, destroyed cities, massive weapons. battle records from the Unification Wars, casualty numbers that made several ambassadors gasp. Humans fought themselves for 30 years, Wu said, her voice shaking. 8 billion people at war, 2 billion died. We developed weapons that could destroy entire continents. We fought in ways that would give you nightmares, and it only ended 35 years ago. Impossible, someone said. You're one of the most peaceful species in the coalition. Because we chose to be, Wu shot back. Because we were exhausted and horrified by what we'd done to ourselves. But those instincts, that knowledge, it's still there. And many of our colony worlds are populated by veterans trying to live peaceful lives. The council members looked at each other uncertainly. One of them, a military analyst named young from a species called the Tarn, leaned forward. Are you saying the colonists might fight back? I'm saying they have no idea what they're about to encounter, Wu said. Back on Nu, the 12-hour deadline approached. The civilian evacuation had managed to get 30,000 people onto transport ships, but 20,000 remained. Most of them were in bunkers now, protected as well as possible. Wu stood in an underground command center, surrounded by communication equipment salvaged from farming operations. Around him were people he'd lived beside for years, now transformed back into what they once were. They wore civilian clothes, but their faces showed the same hard determination he remembered from Earth's battlefields. All units, this is Fortress Command, Wu said into the communications device. The deadline expires in 5 minutes. Remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to survive. We're trying to protect our people until help arrives. Make every shot count. Make them pay for every meter. And most importantly, come home alive. Above them, the fleet moved into orbital position. 60 warships, carrying thousands of soldiers. Their commander, a veteran of a dozen conquests, looked down at the peaceful farming colony with satisfaction. This would be over in an hour. Begin landing operations, he ordered. Show these mammals what happens when they refuse the Empire. Troop carriers descended through the atmosphere, heading for the main population centers. The soldiers inside checked their weapons and laughed. They had heard humans were gentle, that they negotiated everything. This would barely qualify as combat. The first carrier landed in a wheat field near the colony's edge. The doors opened and soldiers rushed out, expecting to see fleeing civilians. Instead, they saw an empty field. Then the ground beneath them exploded. The explosion tore through the wheat field, sending soldiers flying through the air. Before they could recover, more explosions erupted across the landing zone. Men had buried mining charges throughout the area, connected to remote detonators. He pressed the triggers from a safe bunker 2 kilometers away, watching through cameras. Zone 1 is active, he reported calmly. Enemy forces taking heavy casualties. The commander in orbit watched his monitors with growing confusion. What's happening down there? Report. The response came broken and panicked. Explosives, sir. The landing zone was trapped. We've lost 30% of the first wave. Impossible, the commander hissed. They're farmers. Advance and secure the area. But advancing proved costly. The surviving soldiers moved forward cautiously, only to discover the entire colony had become a maze of death. Every street corner could hide an ambush. Every building might contain a sniper. Every open space might be a kill zone. Jin lay on the roof of a grain silo, her modified industrial laser in hand. It wasn't a proper military weapon, but she had adjusted the focusing lens and power output. At 2 kilometers, she could burn through armor. She took her time, breathing slowly, remembering her training from decades ago. She squeezed the trigger. The laser flash lasted less than a second. 2 kilometers away, an officer dropped, a smoking hole through his chest. His unit scattered in confusion, not knowing where the shot came from. Target down, Jin whispered into her communication device. Moving to next position. In the colony's main street, Dong had created something terrifying from farm equipment. He had taken 6 heavy construction vehicles, the kind used for moving earth and building structures, and modified them. Reinforced plating from storage containers, ramming bars welded to the front, explosive charges loaded in the cargo beds. When forces entered the street, Dong and his team activated the remote controls. The massive vehicles roared to life and charged down the street like angry beasts. The soldiers tried to scatter, but the street was narrow. The vehicles crashed through their formations, and when they finally destroyed them with their weapons, the vehicles exploded, taking dozens more aliens with them. "They're fighting back," a soldier screamed into his communicator. "These aren't civilians, they know what they're doing." The commander refused to believe it. He sent more troops, more carriers, but each landing met the same result: ambushes, traps, precise attacks that showed military training. His forces were supposed to be fighting farmers, but they were dying like soldiers in a real war. In the underground command center, Wu listened to the reports and adjusted his strategy. They were inflicting damage, but they still had overwhelming numbers. Eventually, the aliens would adapt and push through. He needed to buy more time. "Fortress command to all units," he said. "Execute fallback plan. Draw them deeper into the colony. Make them pay for every building." The human fighters began withdrawing, but not in panic. They moved in organized groups, covering each other, leaving more traps behind. They thought they were winning and pushed harder. That was exactly what Wu wanted. Aboard the Harmony's light, the entire Coalition Council watched the battle through satellite feeds. The image showed a small farming colony holding against a massive military force. Impossible, yet happening. Wu stood beside the display, her face pale. "This is what humans became during our wars. This is what we learned." Young, the military analyst, couldn't look away from the screens. His species, the Tarn, had been warriors once, but nothing in their history compared to what he was watching. The humans moved with a coordination that spoke of long experience. Their tactics were brutal and efficient. They turned everything into weapons. "Your species fought like this against each other?" he asked quietly. "For 30 years, Wu confirmed. Every major city became a battlefield. We developed new ways to kill, new strategies, new weapons, and we got very, very good at it." "How many of you know how to fight?" "Almost everyone," Wu said. "Military service was mandatory during the wars. Even after peace, the knowledge remained. We teach it in schools, though we call it history. Every human knows the basics of survival and combat, even if they've never actually fought." A council member turned to her. "Then why did you present yourselves as peaceful? Why hide this?" Wu met his eyes. "Because we were ashamed. Because we nearly destroyed ourselves. Because we wanted to be better. We came to the stars hoping we could leave all that violence behind. But it seems the galaxy won't let us." On Nu, the battle had been raging for 2 hours. They had captured parts of the colony, but their casualties were staggering. They had expected to lose maybe 50 soldiers in the entire operation. They had already lost over 1,000. The commander's frustration turned to rage. These mammals had embarrassed him, made him look weak. His pride wouldn't allow it. He made a decision that would change everything. "Target the civilian bunkers," he ordered. "If they want to fight like soldiers, they can watch their families die like soldiers." His officers looked uncertain. "Sir, that's against coalition law. Targeting civilians is a war crime." "The coalition isn't here," the commander snarled. "And these humans broke the rules first by hiding their military capabilities. Fire when ready." The orbital bombardment began. Energy beams lanced down from space, targeting the underground bunkers where civilians sheltered. The first strike hit the northern shelter complex. 1,500 people died in an instant. Wu felt the ground shake and knew what had happened. He pulled up the casualty reports and felt something break inside him. All the years of peace, All the distance he had put between himself and his violent past, it all meant nothing now. "They hit the civilian shelters," he said, his voice hollow. "They're targeting non-combatants." Around him, the other former soldiers reacted with cold fury. This was a line that shouldn't be crossed. During the Unification Wars, for all their brutality, both sides had tried to protect civilians when possible. They had just shown they had no such honor. Min spoke quietly, permission to use extreme measures. Wu nodded. Granted, no more restraint, make them bleed. The fighting intensified. The human defenders stopped falling back. They held every position to the death. When soldiers entered buildings, they found every room trapped. When they tried to advance through streets, automated defenses activated. The humans had been fighting carefully before, trying to minimize losses on both sides. Now they fought to kill. But the most important thing was happening in space. The attack on civilian bunkers had been broadcast across the galaxy. Every species saw it. The Coalition Council saw it. And most importantly, Earth saw it. On Earth, in a military command center that few aliens knew existed, alarms sounded. Fleet Admiral Sung watched the footage from Nu and felt the old familiar anger. He was 60 years old and had hoped to never deploy his ships in combat, but the decision was now easy. He opened a communication channel that reached across light years, directly to Coalition space. "This is Earth Defense Fleet Command. The Empire has committed war crimes against our citizens. We are responding with military force. Clear the space around Nu. Our ships are jumping in 30 minutes. In the Coalition Council chamber, several ambassadors looked confused. "Earth has no military fleet," one of them said. "They've never shown any warships." Wu smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You're about to learn the last secret we kept. We have fleets. We always did. We just never mentioned them." Young checked his sensors. "I'm detecting jump signatures forming, multiple large vessels." He paused, his face showing shock. 14 signatures, capital ship class." The commander received the same information. He laughed. 14 ships, I have 60, let them come." But he didn't understand what was coming. The ships that Earth had built were not like Coalition vessels. They weren't designed for exploration or trade. They were designed for one purpose: war. They were built by a species that had spent 30 years perfecting the art of destruction, then spent 35 more years refining those designs, hoping never to use them. The jump signatures grew stronger. In 30 minutes, they would learn the difference between warriors and survivors. They would learn what happened when you attacked a species that chose peace but never forgot war. In the bunkers of Nu, the remaining civilians huddled in fear. Above them, the veteran defenders prepared for what they thought might be their last stand. And in the darkness of space, reality began to tear as Earth's fleet prepared to arrive. The darkness of space tore open like fabric. One by one, 14 massive ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. They were angular and brutal in design, covered in armor plating and weapon systems. They bore names that meant nothing to most aliens but everything to humans: Fury, Soul's Defiance, Pride. On the bridge of this Fury, Admiral Sung looked at the tactical display. The fleet was clustered around Nu, some ships in orbit, others in defensive positions. They hadn't moved yet, probably still trying to understand what they were facing. "Admiral, we're receiving a hail from the commander," his communications officer reported. "Ignore it," Sung said coldly. They had their chance to talk. They chose to murder civilians instead. "All ships target their orbital vessels first. Fire when ready." Captain Sora, commanding this Fury, smiled grimly. She had waited her entire career for this moment, though she had hoped it would never come. Her ship had been built 20 years ago, kept in secret storage, maintained and upgraded but never deployed. Today, it would finally serve its purpose. "Weapons," she said calmly. "Target the 3 closest cruisers. Fire." The human ships carried weapons that made coalition technology look primitive. That could accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. Missile systems that could saturate an area with hundreds of warheads. Energy weapons designed not for mining or utility, but for pure destruction. The rounds crossed the distance in seconds. The cruiser crews barely had time to react before the projectiles punched through their shields and armor like paper. One ship exploded immediately. The other two began venting atmosphere and debris. Enemy vessels destroyed or disabled, the tactical officer reported. Enemy fleet is breaking formation. The commander finally understood his mistake. These were not exploration vessels with light defensive armaments. These were warships built by a species that understood war in ways his people never had. He immediately sent a signal to all his ships. All vessels return fire, target the human ships. The fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic weapons. The space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire, but the human ships were ready. Countermeasures active, Sora's defensive officer announced. Electronic warfare systems jamming their targeting, point defense destroying incoming missiles, shields holding. The human ships had been designed with redundancy in mind. Every system had a backup. Every weakness had been anticipated and protected. They were built by engineers who had watched their own ships die during the unification wars and learned from every failure. Return fire all weapons, Sora ordered. Show them what we learned during our wars. The battle was brutal and one-sided. They had numbers, but the humans had experience and technology born from necessity. Each human ship took on multiple vessels and one tore through hulls. Missiles found gaps in defenses. Energy weapons overloaded shields. Admiral Sung watched the battle with cold efficiency. He felt no joy in this, only grim satisfaction. They had forced this confrontation. Now they would learn. "Sir, the commander is requesting to speak with you," the communications officer said. "Put him through," Sung replied. The commander's face appeared on screen. His yellow eyes showed fear for the first time. "Admiral, we request immediate ceasefire. We are willing to negotiate surrender terms." "Surrender," Sung said quietly. "Did you offer surrender to the civilians you murdered? Did you give them a chance to negotiate?" "That was a mistake," the commander said quickly. "A tactical error. We are willing to pay reparations." "Reparations?" Sung's voice was ice. "You think money replaces lives? You attacked our people because you thought we were weak. You targeted civilians because you thought we wouldn't fight back. Now you want mercy." He leaned forward. "Here's my response. No, you get no mercy today. You wanted to see what humans are capable of. Watch." He cut the transmission and turned to his fleet. "All ships, continue engagement. No warship leaves this system." The battle continued for another 25 minutes. The human ships moved with deadly precision, their captains working together like they shared one mind. They had trained for this, studied every battle in human history, learned from every mistake. They fought bravely, but bravery meant nothing against superior tactics and technology. When it was over, 56 ships had been destroyed. 4 had managed to survive, badly damaged and powerless. The human fleet had suffered damage to 5 ships, but no losses. On Nu, the ground forces heard the news over their communication devices. The soldiers, cut off from support and hearing their fleet had been destroyed, began surrendering in groups. They had seen enough human tactics to know they couldn't win. Wu stood in the ruins of the colony's main street, watching soldiers throw down their weapons. Around him, the other defenders emerged from their positions. They looked exhausted, covered in dirt and blood, but alive. "Stand down," Wu ordered. "Accept their surrender. Treat prisoners according to standard protocols." The irony wasn't lost on him. They had shown no mercy to civilians, but humans would follow the rules of war even now. It was one of the differences between them. Transport ships began landing, but these weren't evacuation vessels. They were military transports carrying human marines. The soldiers who emerged wore combat armor and carried weapons that made the gear look like toys. But they weren't here to fight. The fighting was over. Commander Min-ho led the Marine detachment. He found Wu standing among the ruins and saluted crisply. "Sir, Marine Company Baker reporting. We're here to secure the colony and evacuate civilians." Wu returned the salute tiredly. He hadn't held military rank in years, but old habits remained. "Good to see you, Commander. We have wounded that need immediate medical attention, and we have about 3,000 prisoners." "Understood. Medical teams are deploying now." Min-ho looked around at the makeshift defenders. "You held them off with farming equipment and mining explosives." "We had good training," Wu said simply, "and we were protecting our homes." Aboard the Harmony's light, the entire Coalition Council watched in stunned silence as the battle reports came in. The humans had revealed a military capability that matched or exceeded any species in the galaxy. More importantly, they had shown a level of tactical skill that spoke of long experience. Wu stood before them, no longer pleading but explaining. "This is what we didn't tell you. This is what we kept hidden. Not because we wanted to deceive you, but because we hoped we would never need to use it." Young was reviewing the battle data. "Your fleet coordination, your weapons technology, your tactical doctrine, it's all so advanced. How long have you been preparing for war?" "We never stopped," Wu admitted. "We ended our wars, but we didn't forget the lessons. We built these ships hoping they would rust in storage. We trained soldiers hoping they would never see combat. We prepared for war while praying for peace." An ambassador from a species called the spoke up. "You lied to us. You pretended to be peaceful while hiding weapons." "We didn't lie," Wu said firmly. "We are peaceful, but peace doesn't mean defenseless. We chose not to use violence. That's different from being incapable of it." She gestured to the battle footage. "They made the mistake of thinking our choice was weakness. Now they know better." Ho, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "We came to the stars hoping to leave our violent past behind. We presented ourselves as mediators and scientists because that's who we wanted to be. But we also remembered that the galaxy might not let us be that. So we kept our weapons, our fleets, our knowledge, just in case." "And now," the ambassador asked, "what happens now? Will you use this military power to conquer, to dominate?" "No," Ho said quietly. "We'll do what we always did. We'll try to find peaceful solutions. We'll negotiate and compromise. But now everyone knows that if you attack us, if you hurt our people, we can and will respond. We're not asking for fear. We're asking for respect." The Coalition Council had to make a decision. They could condemn humanity for hiding their capabilities and remove them from the Coalition, or they could accept that humanity was more complex than they had believed. Young spoke carefully. "I've studied your history now, your wars, your weapons, your tactics, and I've noticed something. You're not warlike, you're survivors. You learned to fight because you had to, and you learned to do it well, but you also learned when to stop. That's rare." The vote was close, but eventually the council decided. Humanity would face no sanctions. They would pay reparations and their expansion would be halted. And humanity would be given a permanent seat on the Coalition Security Council, recognizing their military capability. 3 months after the Battle of Nu, the Coalition Council convened for a special session. The Grand Chamber was filled with representatives from every member species, but all eyes were on the human delegation. Ho sat at the defendant's table, calm and composed, while Wu organized documents beside him. The charges were serious. Humanity stood accused of deceiving the Coalition about their military capabilities, using excessive force against them, and possessing weapons that violated several treaties they had never officially signed. The prosecutor was a stern alien from a species called the, known for their rigid adherence to law. He stood and addressed the council. The evidence is clear. Humanity hid warships, weapons, and trained soldiers. They presented themselves as peaceful while maintaining a military that rivals the strongest empires in the galaxy. This deception cannot stand. Ho rose to respond. His voice was quiet but carried through the chamber. We did hide our capabilities, that much is true, but deception requires intent to harm. We hid our weapons because we were ashamed of them, because we hoped never to use them again. He activated a holographic display. Images appeared showing Earth during the Unification Wars, destroyed cities, massive weapons, casualty numbers that made several council members gasp. This is what we did to ourselves. 8 billion humans at war, 2 billion dead, our world nearly destroyed. When it finally ended, we made a choice. We would be better. We would seek peace. So you lied about who you were, the prosecutor said. No, Ho replied firmly. We showed you who we wanted to be. We sent scientists, doctors, farmers, diplomats. Those people weren't pretending. They genuinely wanted peace. But we also remembered that wanting peace doesn't guarantee it. So yes, we kept our weapons. We maintained our fleets. We trained our soldiers, but we kept them hidden because we hoped never to need them. They had sent their own representative, a diplomat named. He stood angrily. Humanity's response was excessive. We issued a legal territorial claim. They responded by destroying our entire fleet. Wu stood this time. You didn't just claim territory. You attacked a civilian colony, and when they defended themselves, you bombed shelters full of women and children. 1,500 civilians died in your orbital bombardment. That wasn't war. That was murder. They were fighting back, protested. They revealed themselves as combatants. 847 former soldiers defended 50,000 civilians, Wu said coldly. And even then, they followed rules of engagement. They took prisoners. They provided medical care to wounded soldiers. They fought with honor, even after you showed none. Young, now appointed as an official military analyst for the council, presented his findings. I've studied the battle in detail. The human defenders used minimal force necessary to protect civilians. They could have killed every soldier on the ground, but they accepted surrenders. The human fleet could have destroyed your damaged ships, but they showed restraint. Meanwhile, you deliberately targeted non-combatants. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Several species who had been sympathetic to the now looked uncertain. The evidence was clear. They had committed war crimes, and humanity had responded with measured force. But some council members still worried. A representative from the species spoke. Even if we accept that humanity's actions were justified, we must address the larger question. You have weapons and tactics that frighten us. You have a history of warfare that spans. How can we trust that you won't use this power against us? It was Wu who answered, brought to the council as a witness. He stood in his simple farmer's clothes, looking out of place among the formal representatives. I fought in the Unification Wars. I commanded soldiers. I saw my friends die. I killed people who might have been my neighbors in a different world. His voice was heavy with old pain. When the wars ended, I swore I would never pick up a weapon again. I went anew to grow food and watch sunsets. That's all I wanted. He paused, collecting himself. But then they came. They threatened my new neighbors, my friends, the children I'd watched grow up. What was I supposed to do? Let them die because I made a promise to myself. He looked directly at the council. Humans don't love war. We hate it. We know its cost better than any species here. But we also know that sometimes fighting is the only way to protect what matters. Jin, the medical officer also, she spoke about treating the wounded from both sides. I've spent 3 months helping injured soldiers recover. We could have let them die. They bombed our civilians, but we didn't. Because even in war, we remember our humanity. That's the difference between us and them. The trial lasted for 3 days. Testimony from survivors, battle footage, historical records, and expert analysis. The galaxy watched, waiting to see how the council would judge humanity. On the final day, the council reached its verdict. The head counselor, an ancient being from a species called the Wise Ones, delivered the judgment. We find that humanity did not violate coalition law through their defensive actions. The Empire committed war crimes. Humanity responded appropriately. However, we also recognize that humanity's hidden military capabilities represent a significant shift in galactic power dynamics. He paused, letting that sink in. Therefore, we issue the following rulings. First, the Empire must pay reparations to Nu and cease all expansion for 10 years. Second, humanity will be granted a permanent seat on the Coalition Security Council, with full voting rights. Third, all coalition members must respect each other's territorial integrity. Any unprovoked aggression will be met with collective action. The chamber exploded with reaction. Some species applauded, others looked worried. The delegation stormed out in protest. But the most important change happened quietly. Over the following weeks, several aggressive species that had been planning expansion suddenly their claims. The Empire, which had been harassing smaller species, sent formal apologies and peace offers. The collective, known for their slave trading, began releasing captives. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Humanity wasn't the strongest species. They weren't the most advanced, but they were the most experienced at warfare, and they had shown they would use that experience when necessary. 6 months after the trial, Wu stood in his wheat field on Nu. The colony had been rebuilt. New families had arrived, knowing the truth now. They came because they trusted that veterans like Wu would protect them if needed. A small girl, maybe 7 years old, approached him. Her name was, and she lived on a nearby farm. "Mr. Wu, are we scary to the other aliens now?" Wu knelt down to her level. "No, we're not scary, we're just understood now. They know that we want peace, but they also know that we can protect ourselves." "Is that good?" He thought about it. "Yes, it's good, because now we can have real peace. Not peace because we're weak and others pity us. Peace because we're strong and choose kindness." Seemed satisfied with that and ran off to play. Wu stood and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, human warships patrolled the borders, not looking for fights but ready if needed. It wasn't the retirement he had hoped for, but it was honest. On Earth, Admiral Sung reviewed reports in his command center. The fleet had been deployed 3 more times since Nu, but each time for peacekeeping operations, helping defend weaker species from aggression, escorting refugee ships, providing disaster relief. The galaxy was learning that human military power could protect, not just destroy. Aboard the Harmony's light, Ho and Wu prepared for another council session. Human diplomacy had changed. They still preferred negotiation, still sought peaceful solutions. But now, when they spoke about consequences, everyone listened. It was a strange position to be in. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Wu asked, revealing everything. Ho considered the question. "We didn't have a choice. The forced our hand, but maybe it's better this way. We were always going to be discovered eventually. At least now it happened on our terms, defending innocence rather than in some act of aggression. The other species are still afraid of us." "Some are," Ho agreed. "But fear isn't the worst foundation for peace. Respect mixed with caution might actually work better than the pity we had before." Across the galaxy, the impact of humanity's revelation continued to spread. Military academies studied human tactics. Diplomats learned about human psychology. Scientists researched human weapons technology, not to copy it but to understand it. The Empire fractured, many of their subject species rebelling and seeking coalition protection. Without their military superiority, they had nothing to hold their empire together. Some, like, actually apologized privately to human diplomats, admitting they had underestimated humanity's capacity for both violence and mercy. Young published a paper about humanity that became required reading at every coalition institution. Its conclusion was simple. Humans are not warriors. They are survivors. They learned to fight because their history demanded it. They learned to fight well because their survival depended on it. But they also learned when to stop fighting, and that might be their most important skill. On Nu, as the twin suns set, Wu finished his work in the fields. He walked back to his small house, tired but content. Inside, he kept a box in the closet. It contained his old military insignia, his medals, and a folded flag from the unit he commanded during the wars. He hadn't opened it in years. But now, once a month, he took it out and looked at it, not with pride but with remembrance. These were reminders of who he had been and what humanity had survived. They were warnings about what humans could become if they forgot the cost of violence. He put the box away and made dinner. Outside, children played in the streets. Ships came and went peacefully. The colony thrived. This was what those old battles had been for. This was what made the sacrifice meaningful. The galaxy had learned that humans were gentle because they chose to be, not because they had to be. And that choice, made every day by billions of humans across the stars, was what truly made them peaceful. They had seen the alternative. They had lived through it. They had almost destroyed themselves learning the lessons. Now they just wanted to share those lessons with any species willing to listen. And if someone wasn't willing to listen, if they chose violence and aggression, well, humanity had lessons about that too. Hard lessons, learned in blood and fire. Lessons they would teach if they had to, but always hoping they wouldn't need to. The stars shone above Nu. Somewhere out there, human warships kept watch. Down on the surface, former soldiers grew food and raised families. And everywhere, humans continued choosing peace, one day at a time, knowing the cost of the alternative.